Hey everybody, I'm the Bat Otter, and today I'm going to be reviewing Death, the Deluxe Edition by Neil Gaiman. With all the Sandman, I guess, controversies going on lately with the Netflix series, whatever, anytime there's a new series or something, I always get kind of hooked on the bandwagon of where it originated from. And after seeing a lot of Jim Lee's illustrations of these characters, his illustration of Sandman, Death, among some of the other endless, I was finally like, oh, well, I've been seeing the books at the bookstore for a while, so I decided that I'd go pick up Sandman number one. But you're saying this isn't Sandman number one? Yeah, I know. I waited too long. I was like, do I really want it? I went back and then it wasn't there. I was like, so I got Death instead, which I wanted, right? I wanted to read both of them. I just wanted to only get one. Turns out this is pretty good too. According to Stephen King, Neil Gaiman is simply put a treasure house of story, and we're lucky to have him in the medium. I don't know if you guys ever have heard of Stephen King. He's a little horror writer. I think he might be getting into the movie business soon, but yeah, small praise, right? Uh, that's a joke, guys. um, but the characters and the endless have fascinated me. So it turns out they're pretty good. I've been well entertained and yeah, entertained by these stories. It starts with an issue out of the Sandman series, Death's first appearance. Sandman is feeding birds at a park. Some kid's playing soccer. He catches the ball and he's like, "Whoa, man, you got wicked skills." And he's like, "I'm depressed. I'm not happy." And it turns out him and Death are siblings. And right off the bat, she shows up. She says, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Feeding the pigeons." And she says, "You do that too much. You know what you get?" And he's just in the dumps, man. He looks like that picture of Keanu Reeves, and she says, "Fat pigeons." That's a line from Mary Poppins, and she's all happy. Uh, so it turns out he's all down in the dumps because he lost a lot of power. He was trapped. A bunch of crazy, endless stuff that there's no context for since it's throwing you in absolutely blind. So she yells at him that he's moping around like a baby, and says, "Hey, come to work with me." And basically, what the issue becomes is Death going around taking people's lives as she does. And you think, oh, well, that's kind of morbid. But what ends up happening is you are introduced to these characters, and in 2 pages, one thing that I learned about reading Berserk is the value in getting you to care about, understand, or know a one-off character in a very short period of time. That's like a staple of a really good writer. And that's all Neil Gaiman does this entire issue. I think he introduces 3 or 4 characters. This man who's on his deathbed playing a violin, and he's like, "Nah, I'm no gypsy, I'm a Yid, an old Jew dying lonely in New York. And she's like, "Yeah, I know." And he's like, "Oh, you're Death." And he says a Jewish hymn, recites it before he dies, and then he sees himself dead. And he says, "I'm glad that I said the Shema. My old man always said it guaranteed you a place in heaven." And he says, "So now I'm dead. Now what?" And she says, "Now's when you find out." And Sandman witnesses. She draws him close. "From the darkness I hear the beating of mighty wings." And in between, he talks about some more story premises. But it becomes this very mental thing, right? You don't see a lot of it, but you hear Sandman's descriptions very vivid of what's occurring in the background. And it gives you this, even with the personification of Death, what happens afterwards is still pretty vague. It seems like Gaiman is going with a more Egyptian-centric mythology and outlook on death from some of the things that they're saying, but I digress. You go to a comedian on stage, ends up getting killed by the mic. She gets carried off. There's a baby who dies, and all throughout, Sandman is watching his sister do her everyday business, taking lives, and just reflecting on the whole premise. He says it's kind of funny how much humans run away from death. They don't love her, and he remembers a song about death, and all in all, it culminates in him feeling better about himself and wanting to return to whatever he does best. And in an odd sort of way, whenever I read the story and I saw all the lives the fictional lives, that is, that Neil Gaiman inserted into it, it just made you feel good at the very end of it, even though this kid who was playing soccer ends up dying. And it's handled in a funny way, and I think that's what the point is it handles something really heavy-handed like death, being this character here, and it contrasts it with death, this character here. So like this kid, he just got hit by a car playing soccer ball, and he's like, oh hey, it's you again, I didn't know that you meant see you later like this. And she says, hey, before you say anything else, you should probably see something, because she's gonna show him that he's dead. And Sandman rejoices. He throws the grain into the air, and he hears it, the sound of wings. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of double meanings, metaphors in this that are just going right over my head like these fat pigeons. But throughout the rest of the stories, like even this one about this changeling who has this Egyptian curse cast upon her, and all she wants to do is kill herself, Death shows her the way out by talking to Ra, the sun god. That's Ra, isn't it? And she's happy whenever she finally dies and is lifted, and all Death says to all the people is, I'll be seeing you, right? Because they're gonna die. And then we get taken to a story that I like. It's very simplistically illustrated, but about kind of Death's origins, and how every single time that she would come to these living beings and greet them with death, they would be scared, they'd be ungrateful. So eventually she stopped, and that caused more chaos than it was worth. So she realized the importance of her job, and instead of being very down and depressed about killing these people, she became the character that she is, which is very kind of joking, quippy, funny, uplifting. Again, a contrast to Death. And even her character is pale white instead of pitch black, which most people associate with Death. So I see a lot of the contrast, and to me it works, especially the way that Neil Gaiman writes, and not illustrates, but writes the stories. And they're nice short stories. I like these first two very well. I didn't quite understand the point of this next one, which is where I read it up to, where she is tasked with finding this Mad Hetty's heart. She ends up getting captured by some lunatic while she's taking this suicidal teenager around. And you'll notice the trend with these stories, that ultimately it ends with Death teaching somebody, even if that somebody is herself, a lesson about life. And this story ends with this kid who was suicidal, didn't like his mom, didn't like where he was, didn't appreciate life any. He had this nice, very genuine interaction with an endless, eternal being that ends with him being very happy with himself and feeling better than he did before, all because he went on this short little journey with her where he almost died. He was like, oh man, I'm almost dead. And Death kills herself at the fountain before this Looney Tune could get to her. I don't know what he wanted with her, but she decided that this was the day of the centuries that she was going to be a living being. So she was real here, but then she ends up meeting herself in the afterlife. And she says, I wish it could have gone on forever. And there's this real nice, wholesome, I think that word is overused, but where the day wasn't much of anything. She got kidnapped, she got punched, she ate a hot dog, she went out with this kid, and she said, oh man, it was so wonderful to breathe, and we had a hot dog, and we had this, and we had that. Oh, it was such a good day. And she takes her own life happily, right? As she becomes the endless being again. All the while, this kid is like, oh, even if that girl was Death, I guess I'll find out one day. And he's like, I guess I wouldn't mind so much meeting her if I died, right? Hetty gets her heart back and goes on to hide it again. And so I didn't totally grasp the whole story. I looked it up and nobody has a video or nothing on it, which is really weird. It's the internet. But I liked it just because all of these stories make you feel good. It has that contrast. So as a whole, I didn't read past this story. I'm still in the middle of reading it, but I feel like after this story, it's not as good. Like something in my gut just tells me I better review it now before I end up like consuming the whole book. And so it's a nice book. I recommend it. I'm assuming that these next stories are going to be as entertaining. I just didn't read them. And yeah, all in all, a good book. It makes you think. And I just felt happy after reading them. You guys kind of get that? There aren't a lot of books where I can read it and after the fact I'm like, oh, I feel better about myself. Watching these people feel better and learn lessons about themselves. It's not super deep unless you want it to be. But then since it's not, it could just be something nice, fun, with genuine interaction between characters. And you can see genuine outlooks that you don't always see in stories. Like that 16-year-old kid who doesn't like his mom and wants, I just want to kill myself. Then he tries to kill himself. And he's like, wait, I don't actually want this. And he ends up becoming happy because it's like, hey, man, you're like 16. Relax. It's not that deep. And, of course, you get the back, which I always love. A ton. Just a whole bunch of covers from the different stories. And I think with the design of Death, there is an opportunity to illustrate scenes, again, with that heavy contrast that I keep on bringing up, that you wouldn't be able to do if it was the Grim Reaper. Like here, it's somebody crying over the corpse of, presumably, her husband, her boyfriend, her lover, and somebody in, like, I don't know what you'd call that, punk rock dress, emo, standing over them. Like, this wouldn't work in any other story, in any other setting, but because that's just the design of the character, you can do these very unique drawings, illustrations. This is obviously the Holocaust, and she's standing over the bodies. It's, it's a bit grotesque, but I mean, it's Death, right? You're not exactly expecting sunshine and rainbows. So it offers very unique storytelling avenues and artwork avenues, which anything like that I really appreciate, because I feel like there's not a lot of unique things. There's lots of Xeroxes and copies and mimics and imitations nowadays, but there's not a lot of unique premises, especially in comics. I mean, look at Invincible, The Boys, Injustice. Like, they're all the same thing. It's like, what if Superman was evil? And it's, he'd be evil. And it's like, yeah, but like, this is more realistic. It's like, is it any more realistic than if he was a good guy? I mean, to me, people use realistic to mean just gritty, which to me, these stories are realistic, and they're not gritty. They're happy. So I don't like this idea that realistic has to mean super gritty and super mean and messed up and depressing when it could really be something good. You just need to be a good writer. I did skip to the end since I was already looking through all this artwork, where there was this like infomercial from Death about AIDS. She's teaching you how to use a condom and have safe sex. So that's there. That's whenever there was the AIDS epidemic breaking out back in the 90s. I didn't know that. I thought that was the 70s and 80s, not the 90s, but hey, so practice safe sex, everybody. And that's the book. You'll see her again soon. Hopefully not. You guys, because you need to stay subscribed, like the video. I'm out of books to review, if I'm being honest. So if you guys have any topics or avenues that you want me to talk about, I'd love to. Because if I can't review books and I don't know what to talk about, I'm like, oh man, I'm kind of dead in the water. So yeah, I hope you guys liked it. I enjoyed this book. I'd say, it's, what is it? It's $30? Yeah, it's $30, so it's actually cheaper than any of the collected editions of Sandman, but Sandman is the longer, so it gives you more story. If you're just gonna read what I read, don't get it, I gotta say. But if you like the artwork, if you are looking for something very unique, definitely look into something like this. But yeah, you guys have any suggestions for future videos, I'm all ears. Aside from that, I'll see you guys later.